Question to the deputant, Councillor Holiday.
Mr. Scolari, I'll ask a similar question as I did to the previous speaker. Do you think council is offside with the wishes or the expectations of the population of the city?
I just think that the people of the city should be consulted when you're making decisions that involve our money, and we weren't in this case. And look, if the people said Sankofa Square was what they wanted, I'm fine. That's what the people wanted. But I just think that this was done in a manner where the vast majority of Torontonians were unaware of it, and now they are aware of it, and they're extremely unhappy about it.
So if people aren't consulted adequately, and if there's a sentiment that council's offside with the wishes of the people, does that further enhance or erode the confidence in government by the population?
It erodes it. I don't think people trust government as it is, and this is another example of why they don't.
And if there's a break in trust, does that hinder the government's ability to do things such as run a financially secured city, take on things like confronting anti-Black racism, or do things like provide services?
Yes, I think people just throw their hands up and they don't get involved and they just walk away from it. I think it really hinders the city. I think it hinders city council's credibility. And by not including the greater Toronto area, the people, the city of Toronto, they've made a major mistake, and I think it's coming to light now.
Thank you.
Any other questions to the deputant? Okay, no, thank you very much. The next deputant is Joey Goldman. Are you here, Joey Goldman? Are you online? Mr. Goldman, are you online? Joey Goldman? Okay. Okay, not online, not here. Linda Dundas. You are online? Linda Dundas, I believe you're online. You can speak now.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Just speak up. There you are. We can now see you.
Thank you very much. Let me just get myself sorted. I'm stuck.
No, we can hear you.
Thank you. Your worship, esteemed councillors, my name is Linda Dundas, and my comments relate to item 1F, rebranding of Young Dundas Square to Sankofa Square. A brand is intended to create a positive association in the mind of the targeted audience and ultimately produce benefits for customers and value for owners and shareholders. With this in mind, I have a simple question. Why would you think that it's a good idea to swap the name of an individual who, as the public record shows, defended Indigenous rights in Canada, defended Black loyalists, supported Francophone rights and bilingualism, successfully defended a runaway slave, was an early supporter not just of abolition of the slave trade, but of slavery itself, and proposed a comprehensive and pragmatic 12-point plan to end it, for instead the name of a tribe in Africa that was notorious for selling slaves and even much worse?
Madam
What
Chair,
brand will that create?
Just 1
What will it say
second.
about Toronto's brand?
Just 1 second. Hang on, hang on.
point of privilege.
Oh, I just recited improperly. Ew. I'll let it run for 1 minute. Councillor Perks.
Once again, we have a deputant who is straying into territory that I feel violates the city's off-stated commitment to confronting anti-Black racism. If we could just have order.
So, yeah, Councillor
And I
Perks, just
ask that
finish.
you remind the deputant that we want to create an environment where everyone feels welcome to participate, and this kind of language will be alienating to many people in Toronto.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Ms. Dundas?
The name is the name, and it has the origin that it has. That's all I'll say about that.
Okay, continue.
Shall I continue?
Yes,
Thank
please.
you. What brand will that create, and what will it say about Toronto's brand? As to Sankofa, learning from the past, to those who put that name forward, not only have you obviously not learned from the past, but this renaming is incredibly disrespectful of those you purport to honor and of the citizens of Toronto. It debases the city and makes a laughing stock of it on the world stage. How has Toronto learned from the past when City Council ignores the writings of experts in peer-reviewed articles that exonerate Henry Dundas, such as those by historian Angela McCarthy, not to mention the request from 3 former mayors of Toronto asking that the renaming decision be reconsidered? What will it say about Toronto as a principal city in Canada that city officials willfully ignored the facts and the will of the people and continued to promote a false narrative to push through a senseless and costly change rather than elevating history and the opportunity for all to learn from it? What lesson will history take away about the people who steamrolled this through without appropriate governance and consultation based on ill-founded recommendations from inexperienced consultants? And what will Toronto's brand be at the end of all of this? Here's the past that we should learn from, again, all on the public record and supported by peer-reviewed research from renowned scholars. History shows that by his words and by his deeds, Henry Dundas consistently over a span of more than 20 years demonstrated his support for abolition and other social causes, including many touching Canada directly. As early as 1778, Henry is recorded as saying, "Human nature, my lords, spurns at the thought of slavery among any part of our species." Several years later, during the debates around abolition, records show that Henry professed himself as determined a friend to the abolition of the slave trade as any man, and thought that the African slave trade was contrary to justice and humanity and that it ought to be abolished. In 1796, his support for abolition was clearly and publicly acknowledged by a key abolitionist who summarized Henry's position as follows: "The right honorable gentleman and myself agree in our premises. However, we may differ with respect to our conclusion. He admits that the trade is not only inconsistent with humanity and justice, but with policy and prudence in time of war. It appears then that we only differ as to the mode of abolition. The right honorable gentleman states a powerful objection to our mode, namely that it is impracticable." Henry's proposed 12-point plan was a sincere attempt to reconcile two strongly entrenched opposing sides. As the Parliamentary Register notes, he desired gentlemen to recollect that there was a path between these two extremes, a middle path that might meet the panic, the prejudices, and the habits of the West India merchants and obtain the object of the abolition of the slave trade effectually. In 1793, after a proposal for immediate abolition was defeated, John Graves Simcoe, whom Henry Dundas had appointed, persuaded the Assembly to accept a plan for gradual abolition following Henry's strategy, and Upper Canada became the first British territory to abolish slavery. So if you want to cancel Henry Dundas for adding the word gradual, then you should think about canceling Simcoe Day and renaming all Simcoe assets. But if you celebrate Simcoe for abolishing slavery, you should also celebrate Henry Dundas, who made it possible. And by the way, in 1801, Henry Dundas also convinced King George III to fire the governor of the Cape, George Young, yes, that Young, for engaging in an illegal scheme to smuggle slaves. So maybe it's the name Young that needs to be removed from the square, not Dundas. If you want to honor minority rights, keep the name of the guy who fought for them in the early days of Canada's history and helped establish the multicultural society Canada is today. Henry Dundas deserves to occupy a place of honor in Canadian history. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Council Holiday, question?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Dundas, could you elaborate a bit more on your understanding of the history and the contribution of Henry Dundas to Canada?
Oh, that's, how much time have we got? So Indigenous rights, Francophone rights, and Black loyalists. Those are the three that immediately come to mind. And if you're interested, we can provide references. But with respect to Black loyalists, there was an offer made to them to return to Africa and to have land granted to them. Many of them, I forget the exact number, took that up. In terms of supporting the French language, Henry Dundas encouraged or ordered Lord Dorchester to allow them to express themselves in French and to have written materials in French. And with respect to, let me see, Black loyalists, the Francophone, Indigenous rights, he also ordered that Indigenous rights be respected. And that's about probably all that we have time for. But I'm happy to provide a more fulsome memo to council.
So just succinctly, because I don't know that we've talked a lot about it, there's many academic discussions worldwide about Dundas being an abolitionist or not. But what I wanted to do, because you've got deeper knowledge, is do you have any comments on Dundas's impact to Toronto? I seem to recall a relationship between him and Osgood and what they did. And I thought it would be helpful for the committee to hear that about why Dundas is relevant to the city of Toronto and to Canada.
Well, again, that deserves a further follow-up, which I'm happy to provide. I can't sort of off the cuff provide the response on Osgood. John Graves Simcoe obviously is somebody who's celebrated in Toronto. He will be celebrated in 2 weeks' time. He was an appointee. I believe there was a relationship between all of those men, and they Henry Dundas appointed John Graves Simcoe, who did so knowing that John Graves Simcoe knew what Henry Dundas's position was on slavery. Henry Dundas appointed John Graves Simcoe knowing what his feelings were about it as well. Clearly there was consultation between the men in terms of passing the strategy that was used to obtain the passage of that law in Upper Canada. So it's notable to me that virtually all of the jurisdictions at the time that were successful in abolishing slavery or taking the first steps towards abolishing slavery did so in a gradual manner. And that was because of the extensive opposition that they were encountering. And so there was a recognition, as I read, that the words of Henry Dundas in the Parliamentary Register, there was a recognition that the only way to do so was to bring everybody together through that middle path that he referenced.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions to deputants? Thank you very much, Ms. Dundas. The next speaker is Sifo Kaku. Kaku? Yeah, you're online, right? Sifo, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Sifo Kwaku. Ms. Kwaku, are you there? No, we'll come back to those that are not available. It's the person online?
Hello.
You are online. Okay, let's go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, greetings, Mayor Chow, members of the Executive Council, staff, and deputants. My name is Sipo Kwaku. I've lived in the city of Toronto now for approximately 59 years. My ancestors were taken as enslaved Africans from the shores of Ghana, transported to the Barbados, and were purchased by an English gentleman by the name of Ashby, who owned a number of plantations on the island at the time. I was born Russell Ashby. As a young man of African descent, growing up in Toronto, I had very few anchors which anchored me to who I was as a person of African descent. My family of 6 siblings were the only children of African descent in the neighborhood. In primary, middle, and high school, I was often confronted with situations which reminded me that I did not belong here because of who I am, a young man of African descent. I was desperately searching for something which could anchor me. It wasn't until I entered high school where I met other peoples of African descent that I began to see myself. Later on in my latter life, I was introduced to an African-centered rites of passage, coming-of-age process. It was there that I was introduced to the elements of my heritage and understood that I had my cultural and ethnic lineage in the Akan people of Ghana. It is also there that I understood the power of symbols and their powerful role in the process of reclaiming one's cultural self. When we look around this uniquely beautiful and exciting city, full of people from all over the world, we see symbols. we see communities, we see, structures, we hear voices from all around the world. I share this story with you because for me, young people, and in particular young people of African descent, must begin to see themselves. Sankofa Square would be a powerful symbol of remembrance, reaching back into the past, bringing all that was good to the present, and building for our collective future. Now, I've listened to some of the individuals who have deputized and stated their cases as to why Sankofa or Dundas Square should not be remained. I'm going to ask you to allow spaces for others. Allow spaces for others. Allow spaces for others. I will stop, and thank you very much for all those present.
Thank you for your time. Any questions to the deputant? Seeing none, thank you very much for your deputation. Next one on the list is Khalida Bello. Khalida Bello, are you here? Yes, you are. Thank you.
Good morning. Executive Committee.
You can just speak to the mic, make sure your mic is
Thank
open.
you. So I am a Toronto native. I grew up majority of my life in Toronto in predominantly Black communities in the Jane and Finch area and the Rexdale area. And I just have a short commentary based on what we're discussing here today. So it's my understanding and the understanding of members of our community that the city wants to address a challenging history and make the square to be more intentionally inclusive of BIPOC underserved communities. And as the city had said in December, this was proposed after several peer review research papers were examined, and several historians and academics were also consulted as part of this process. And using that knowledge, we're hopeful to be able to see the city honor its processes, its findings, and desires of city councilors representing constituents, as well as thousands of citizens that were in support of renaming the square. We are aiming to address generational trauma and restore trust in BIPOC and underserved communities. And this process was rigorous and fulsome decisions were made to maximize inclusion. And when we consider all of that, it's really important to be able to have the community be able to trust the process of city council and the multiple years that were spent coming to this decision. There is concern with the way in which trust from community would be fragmented and historical traumas be reopened. And today we were discussing how that impacts engagement. Well, it definitely does impact engagement in terms of folks feeling that being part of the process will lead to any kind of lasting change. And so I think that's really important to consider. And on the website, I see that the city consulted more than 20 academic experts knowledgeable in public history, Black Canadian studies, and public commemoration to inform response to the petition and recognition review of the project as a whole. So I just wanted to bring that into our remembrance and consider what the consequences would be to underserved communities that have much less power than corporations, institutions, and other communities that have more power than the underserved that we're trying to represent.
Thank you for that. Councilors, any questions to the deputant? Ms. Bello? Thank you. Thank you for your time. Andrew Lockhead? Andrew Lockhead, are you here? It's online. There he is. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mayor Chow. My name is Andrew Lougheed, and as many of you on the executive committee will already know, I'm the author of the petition that first called on the City of Toronto to begin a public process to rename Dundas Street. While it's always an honor and privilege to address the mayor of our city and our elected representatives, I'm frankly disappointed I must be here again speaking in favor of what to me should be an obvious and easy decision for all of you to support, the naming of Sankofa Square. It's in fact an easy decision to support because it's one you've already made. This is the fourth time I've come to this committee and the fifth time I've spoken to a civic committee on this issue. So the idea that there has been no public consultation on this matter is in fact laughable. Some elements of council, though, continue to insist that this decision should be debated again and again simply because they feel that spending even the smallest amount of public money on efforts to promote reconciliation, to celebrate cultural diversity, and to honor the contributions of Black, African, and African-descended people to our city is worthless. While debate is the lifeblood of our democracy, constantly having to defend the smallest equity-seeking initiatives, such as the naming of a public place, is itself a form of structural and systemic violence that our city has previously committed to eradicating in, for example, its Confronting Anti-Black Racism 5-year plan. In December last year, City Council voted to accept the consensus decision reached by a committee of senior academics, Indigenous elders, community leaders that also represent the interests of business and residents and the voices of historically marginalized people to name our main municipal square Sankofa Square. Sankofa is a name that we've heard speaks to the issues at the very heart of the public conversations that the original petition to rename Dundas Street raised, namely returning to the past to learn from it and to use that knowledge to inform and shape the future. And just as it represents the heart of these concerns, Sankofa as a concept rightfully belongs at the heart of a city like Toronto, a truly global city that's made its rich cultural diversity and commitment to progressive values a part of its core identity. In my work as a scholar of public memory, as an artist and public historian, I've had the opportunity to speak with members of the African Canadian community who've expressed to me the immense sense of pride they feel in seeing Sankofa embraced as a concept in our city and their heritage and contributions to Toronto celebrated and recognized in such a public manner. Indeed, many of these same individuals have expressed how important seeing themselves represented in public is to making them feel a part of the city. And we've heard some of those people speak here today. To suggest, as some have, that Sankofa is not a Canadian name or it has no connection to Canada or Toronto is to deny not only the Canadianness of African Canadians, but is to deny the truly multicultural nation and city that we are. In conclusion, I encourage the Executive Committee and Council to continue to support Sankofa Square as the name for our city's premier public events and gathering place, and to make strong financial commitments to education and outreach initiatives around the name and concept of Sankofa. Further, we must continue to support the important work of the city's recognition review process that addresses the ways in which racism and colonial violence are celebrated in our city's toponyms, monuments, and other public spaces and institutions. If we are to maintain our municipal status as a world leader in equity, diversity, and inclusion, and as I've said before this committee multiple times, live up to our motto of diversity, our strength, I believe we simply cannot afford not to. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
It's a good question.
Any question? Councilor Moyes?
Thank you, Mr. Lockett, for coming in once again for the fourth time and being an ally to the Black community. That's a quick question. How many people signed the original petition?
The original petition that was submitted to council was over 13,000 signatures. And I took great pains to actually, before submitting that petition to council, to actually also verify using postcodes that these signatures did indeed come from a majority of Toronto and GTA addresses.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Any other questions to Mr. Lockheed? Okay, thank you for your time. The next speaker, Linda Collins Backhouse, also online. If you can open up your mic and go ahead. Linda Collins Backhouse. Are you online? You
I
are
am.
online? There
Yes.
you are.
There you go.
We
I
could
need to
hear
take my
you.
skeleton out of the picture. There you go. So thank you very much, Mayor Chow. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the name change to Sankofa Square. By way of introduction, my name is Linda Collins Bacchus. I'm a physiotherapist by profession. I have volunteered in the Toronto Black community since 1988 when I immigrated to Canada from the UK. My volunteer career has been with the African Canadian Heritage Association, which is now celebrating 55 years of cultural heritage programming for children and youth, as well as family. It's an intergenerational program, as well as the African Canadian Rites of Passage, of which I am a graduate and recognized as a community elder. Rites of Passage, in Rites of Passage, we practice, and it's based on the Akan cultural teachings in Ghana. ACHA was also born out of the Rites of Passage process and principles. I have also traveled on numerous occasions to Ghana to carry out volunteer work in the Akan and coastal regions. This volunteer background is relevant when I speak about why the name Sankofa was chosen from the shortlist of 3 names for the square by the Dundas Street Committee, of which I was part. And that was over almost a 2-year process, I believe, from the start. So it was not quick. The word Sankofa, as you know, means go back and fetch it, as is signified by the image of the mythical bird that is looking backward to protect the egg on its back. Symbolically, you may see it as the ancestors, parents, or community protecting the upcoming generation. The meaning of Sankofa as a principle to live by means that you should know the past so you can learn from it and not make the same mistake again. In a way, it is like the phrase used after the Jewish Holocaust, never again. Both ACHA and Rites of Passage processes actively use the Sankofa principle to inform our behavior, teach our cultural history, and knowledge of those who went before us, our ancestors, to build our community. We have done this for all the years I have been involved with both nonprofit, volunteer-based programs. I also live my life with the spirit of Sankofa in the way that I conduct myself and the way that I move in the world. So it's very important to me. The Sankofa symbol is also a well-known and implemented, Yeah,
Yeah,
Sankofa,
but
sorry about
interesting.
that. At least it's a beautiful tune, right? Okay, so let me carry on. The Sankofa print symbol is also a well-known and implemented Adinkra symbol that is seen all over Ghana and the diaspora in the form of wrought iron gates, fences, etc. The image is all around us, and yet we do not know the meaning of it. As many enslaved people exited the Gold Coast, Ghana, after being held in the slave castles and transported like cargo on the many slave ships during the Matha, it seems just that the Ghanaian Akan principle of Sankofa is the name that we landed upon for the name of the square. Dundas, after whom the street in Toronto was named, played a significant role in delaying the end of slavery. Yes, he helped with the abolition, but he delayed it immensely before it could occur for various reasons, which I won't go into now. In addition, he never stepped on Canadian soil. It was felt that the name change should be African based on the atrocities Dundas was linked to, related to slavery. And that was direct. Following consultation with the First Nation groups as part of the committee research in and around Toronto, they resoundingly stated that the name change should be representation of the African culture, not the First Nations culture, for this reason. The city's renaming of the street was charged upon the committee. I was asked to be on the committee as a community member because of my history of volunteer work and the ongoing practice of Sankofa principles as outlined previously. The request was changed to the renaming of the square in order to allow the city to acclimatize and to be educated about why the name change should occur, as well as being less of a financial burden on the city. The city leadership initiating this change is applauded, as it acknowledges to all that slavery was the horror that it was, and that recognition is being addressed by removing one of the offending family names on the main square of the city of Toronto.
Thank you.
Finally, I just have one sentence if I could be
5
allowed to
minutes
finish.
is up.
It is
Finish
a
that
step in the
sentence.
Okay, it is a step in the right direction to changing the narrative by acknowledging the wrongs of the past while educating Canadians about the systemic influence of slavery. It is a positive message that will potentially spearhead the necessary changes and keep hope alive in the younger generations of all Black Canadians that the historical impact of slavery is being acknowledged systemically and politically as they are being seen by the city at the least.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Any questions, Councillor? Before you, I do have one quick question. There was lots of talk about lack of consultation. You're a member of the advisory committee that was set up by the city at the time, and
Yes,
it's been 2 years. So did you do any consultation during the time that you were there?
When, as part of the committee, we consulted, the co-host consulted with the First Nations group, because initially it seemed like if it should be a First Nations name. We went through a rigorous process of understanding where we would land eventually. And the First Nations group, they consulted all of the surrounding First Nations people in the GTA, the leaders, and they resoundingly said, why is this a First Nations problem? It's a slavery problem. So that was one of the things that directed us in the way we went, because of the link with Dundas with slavery. And then the other thing that we did was we had a few presentations made by scholars, mostly, some of whom are Ghanaian descent, who allowed us to dissect the choices that were on the table, so we were able to get down to the 3 names that we actually finally had to choose from. So it was, once the names were chosen and suggested by different people on the committee, and there were over 20 of us representing all different aspects of Toronto life, the names that were we consented, that we all agreed to look at those names to whittle down to the final 3. Those names were actually then researched by scholars from York University and around Toronto, to understand some of the nuances of those names, whether they were good names that we should go ahead and use if they had no negative connotations to them. And the reason we came to a principle as a name as opposed to a person is because when you name after a person, as in the case of Dundas, with the atrocities that happened after George Floyd, and everybody was hot to trot about diversity and equity and all that stuff, those names, sometimes you get, after the place or the road has been named, you get some of the negative aspects of that person's history that never was taught in the first place. So a name was not suggested for that reason.
Thank you so much for that answer. Any other questions? If not, the next deputant, Joseph Mensah. You are online, I believe. Joseph Mensah, you are online. He is online. You just go ahead and speak. We can see you, but we can't hear you. Can you open up your mic? Can you open up your mic, Mr. Mansa? No, maybe he stepped away. We're going to come back to you. David Farang, Ghanaian Association of Ontario. Oh, here's Joseph. Mansa? Yeah, we could hear you now. Go ahead. No, we cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. There's usually something called a mic in the lower left-hand corner.
I have turned down.
Yeah, if you could, you have two mics going on. If you can turn off your phone, just use one device, then it will not give you feedback. Can you try saying something again? Now we can't hear you. If you can. Yep, we can hear you now. Go ahead. Just speak louder.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, there's some echo here, but I'll try my best. Yeah.
It's not working. You have serious feedback. You know what? If you can test it out a bit, we're going to come back to you, okay? We're going to, yeah? Are you all right with that? Or do you think you're ready? Can you want to try one more time? Say something.
Hello?
No, it's still a lot of feedback. We'll come back to you, okay? The next deputant, David Farang, Ghanaian Association of Ontario. Are you here physically? Are you online? Is the person online? Yes, he's online. Okay, you're
Yes,
online.
I'm
We can
online.
see you, but if you can just open your mic, we can hear you.
Yeah, I can. You can hear me?
Yep, go for it.
Good. Thank you, Mayor Olivia Chow, members of the executive committee. My name is Professor David Fran, a Trent University professor in Peterborough, and I teach a course in equity, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you for the opportunity to deputize about Sankofa. Now, I would like to share and start by saying that many years ago, 2002, I used to work at the City of Toronto in the diversity management and community engagement. Jack Layton, David Miller were my great friends in the good old days. And so I want to put it there. Toronto is the fourth largest government structure in Canada. And people refer Toronto as the world in the city, meaning that every country of the world is here. What a beautiful thing, right? Now, a city that prides itself in diversity being our strength is a wonderful city. We are very fortunate to be living in a city like this. Now, building inclusive community is about respecting diversity and also promoting equity, right? Now, with naming Dundas Square as Sankofa, the city is addressing the issue of anti-Black racism. The city is also recognizing the presence of equity-deserving community groups in our city. Now, I want to question, how many racial minority names, personalities, or symbols do we see around in the city? So naming Sankofa Square is one great example of what the city is doing. Now, for those who are disputing against Sankofa, I would like to suggest to you that you need to respect diversity so that we can promote equity and inclusion in our city. Now, I want to draw your attention to a report which the city commissioned many years ago, and that was contracted to Michael Onston. And the report was about identifying the racial inequalities in our city. In that report, which was commissioned in 2001, 2002, most Black communities in Toronto were the most underserved community groups. Groups like Ghana, Somalia, and all of them. They were overrepresented in menial jobs. They were overrepresented in all kinds of negative situations in our city. So naming Sankofa, going back to the past to retrieve what belonged to us, is well deserving. And I would like to shout out to the city councillors, the city entire, who try to continue to promote the idea of equity, diversity, and inclusion. That is the essence of our civilized democratic society. And I always tell my students that this is an example of what we call an inclusive policy making. In other words, vertical slice approach. Members of the City Council, I would like to share some brief background about something about Ghana, where the name Sankofa is coming from. You should understand that Ghana was the first Black African country to be independent around 6 March 1957. Now, Ghana was the leader of anti-colonial and pan-Africanist movement trying to eliminate anti-Black racism. Ghana is also home to many of notable like Anton Wheeler, Amo, Yaa Santua, Kwame Nkrumah, Kofi Annan. Of course, you hear the African Ghanaian mythology of Anansi stories happening. Now, Ghanaian Canadians are among the largest Black continental African groups in Canada. We are over more than 100,000 Ghanaians, but unfortunately, the statistics has underscored the little number of the Ghanaians in here. We represent in so many areas of sports and everything. And when we try to name Sankofa, the fact also belongs that we are respecting diversity to the point that we are embracing ourselves, promoting and supporting and creating an opportunity for all those equity-seeking and equity-deserving community groups. Thank you, Mayor and your executive committee, done a good job for naming Sankofa at the Dundas Square. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Any questions to the deputants? If not, our next deputant, Mary Akua Bontin, which is the Vice President of Ghana Association. You are online also. May I ask you to speak? There you are. We can see you. We can hear you.
Great. My name is Mary Akua Bontin. I serve as the Vice President for the Ghanaian Canadian Association of Ontario. And today I am here to share a few things. So I'm hoping it also becomes a learning time for many of us. So when we hear of the word Sankofa, San means to return. So if you, in that Kan language, San means return. Ko means to go. Fa means to pick or to take. And so I am very excited to be here because I've heard many who are disputing about the name Sankofa. Again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to come here to talk about the reason why it is essential for us to go with the name Sankofa. It's unfortunate that the naming has been associated to some people as to slavery, but it's a word that encourages us to return back or to go back to correct our mistakes. As Toronto is changing and we're improving every day. For the years I've been in Canada, I've noticed every day we're looking at ways we can improve and be part of society. Us going back to our roots, or us going back to fetch, or us going back to correct our mistakes becomes essential. The ethos of Canada multiculturalism is for people from different cultural backgrounds to feel a sense of genuine or a sense of belonging, to feel as if it's woven in into the names, place, and narrative of our shared home. Again, today, Toronto is undergoing many changes of multicultural, to make the multicultural community feel welcome, included, or as part of the community. We have many programs looking at anti-Black racism and ways that we can help people of African descent or Black people feel as part of the society or feel included. This is an example of us moving forward when we acknowledge our efforts of improvement. Sankofa has significant meaning to the Afro-Caribbean and African diasporans in Toronto. As a member of the Black Resilient Cluster team, a group of organizations where we focus on serving the Black communities in Toronto, when we all heard about the name change, we were very excited. We were pleased of this name change because it denotes to for us to return to our cultural underpinning as Africans. For many of us young people, it draws us to our roots of identity, something many of us are working very hard. Giving this concept prominence in Toronto will give the people of the city a profound sense of belonging. It will tell us that we are part of Toronto and Toronto's story. And mind you, the Black community is a significant part of Toronto's population. Many of us have jubilated, and we continue to jubilate when we hear the name of Sankofa being suggested as a name in our community. This move will make Toronto become more inclusive and genuine home for a diverse population. As the city is moving to improve its equity, diversity, and inclusion, this is a great start. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Our next speaker, Kemi Jacobs, the Executive Director of Delta Family Resource Center. Kemi, are you here? Are you online also? Okay. If you can open up your mic, we're ready for you.
Good morning. Good afternoon, actually, Mayor,
Yes.
Executive Committee, and the general public. I'm going to start by how I want it to end. And I want you to consider this question as I speak. Can a city like Toronto in 2024 afford not to have a Sankofa Square? That's the question we should be asking. I'm Kemi Jacobs, the ED of Delta Family Resource Center, which is a B3 agency located in Northwest Toronto. We've delivered services to communities in the past for more than 40 years. While my professional and personal lives have consistently focused on empowering communities and advocating for those whose voices are not heard, I identify first as an African woman. An African born in the Caribbean. I've lived in Toronto for more than 40 years. I know, you don't think I'm 40. But anyway, I'm a graduate of the Rites of Passage process, which is a tradition grounded in the Akan tradition of Ghana. I've volunteered with the National Anti-Racism Council, CAFCAN Social Services, and I've been an integral part of Delta Family's journey to becoming a B3 agency. We are proud to be part of a host of agencies, Mary, who just spoke, is one of them, who have supported the recent influx of African refugees and helped them find spaces in the city of Toronto. Over the past year, a committee of community leaders from Toronto's Black communities came together to select a new name for Dundas Square. As the entire global community was forced to face the harsh reality of the enduring, unrelenting impact of anti-Black racism in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, many communities reacted by making the conscious decision to overturn the tribal practice of naming streets, buildings, and spaces after historical Anglo-Saxons who, in their desire to expand and enrich the British Empire, perpetuated atrocities against humankind, particularly Black and brown bodies. In view of the fact that Dundas directly impacted the lives of Africans, it is particularly fitting that the new name honors and celebrates African traditions. It is in view of this that after months of exploration and deliberation, the name Sankofa Square was selected as a new name for the square. Last month, Councillor Holiday asked for an operational and governance review of the initiative. The city manager's office has ably addressed the questions raised. So rather than focusing on already addressed issues, I choose to share with Council just two of the many reasons why it is important for Toronto and for Black people, not just for Black people in Toronto, but for the city of Toronto and for us as Black people in Toronto to have a Sankofa Square. While we speak of the progress made by Black African Canadians, there are too many Black residents who are still excluded and left behind. This exclusion is often expressed in silences, an internalized racism and shame about our African heritage, in denial of our identity. It pains me that we still see underrepresentation of Black teachers in schools. Some of the speakers mentioned this. The overrepresentation of my people in the care and justice system. And in June 2024, I can still hear an educated Black Caribbean woman proudly state that she would not wear a t-shirt with a map of Africa because she has no connection to Africa. Having a Sankofa Square a square which is central to the functioning of Toronto, would do much to erode the impact of internalized racism, leading Black residents to see that our traditions are valued and that we deserve, we can and will take up space as we go back and fetch our connections to our ancestors. Toronto is, I'm biased, Toronto is Canada's coolest city. While conditions have changed since COVID, while the skyrocketing cost of living and extremely high housing costs force many of us to pause, most of us would not choose to live in any other city. Toronto is dope. We have a reputation for being inclusive, for embracing diversity, being intentional in our efforts to be equitable, and to promote anti-oppression and anti-Black racism. And while I may not have drunk the Kool-Aid, there are not too many cities in the world which have a unit, small though it may be, devoted to combating anti-Black racism. Having a Sankofa Square, central meeting place, in the heart of the city of Toronto, which acknowledges the importance of African immigrants, celebrates an African identity, and honors, and at the same time, an Adinkra system, epitomizes Toronto's warrior spirit. It underscores Toronto's commitment to equity and justice, while many regions are backsliding on promises made 4 short years ago. And this can only enhance the city we call home. In closing, while I applaud the city manager's summary of the financial potential, I think we need to really ask, what is the cost of not having a Sankofa Square in the city of Toronto? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation and your time. Joni, oh, hang tight. Oh, you might have lost her. Cami Jacobs, Councillor Holiday had a question to you. Can you come back online?
Sure.
Oh, there you are.
Hi, Ms. Jacobs. Hopefully you can hear me okay, because on the monitor, I couldn't hear the sound really well. And I thought I caught one of your comments, and I just wondered if you could clarify it. It's a really simple question. I thought you had mentioned my name, Councillor Holiday, asking for a governance review. I thought I heard that, and if I'm wrong, please let me know.
And that's what I read in the documents which accompanied the matter being brought to council. Was I wrong? Was it not you?
Yeah, I think the governance review came from elsewhere, but I'm so sorry. I wanted to ask this because the sound connection isn't great, but I wanted to get clarity. You know, when you hear your name and you said, what's that?
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions to the deputant? Nope. Next, I believe Joseph Mensah now has his audio problem fixed. Mr. Mensah, would you like to come online, please? Mr. Mensah, turn on your mic. Oh, there you are. Can you say a few words? We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, perfect. Whew. All right, go
Thank
ahead.
you so much. Thank you. So I won't waste your time. I've heard a lot of the debate, so I will just pick some few points. The first one is to the effect that the city's motto talks about diversity, our strength. Okay, so right there is an effort to diversify the community. So we can start it from there. There are people speaking to the effect that everybody is against this, everybody is going. When you say everybody, if everybody is against it, what happened to us? This is a situation where it is speaking to the tyranny of the majority. You have to remember that power always has something to do with knowledge production. So if you keep on saying knowledge, this is what is the truth, you have to also keep in mind that those who have power have the power to name. So you have to bring this power dynamics into play and listen to those without power. All this debate going on, do you think those without power, the poor person trying to struggle to find something to eat, it will be able to be on this platform? No. So it's just those who are power, who are managing, who are naming. So you have to be mindful of the way power plays in all these things. Next, let me talk about the fact that we talk about integration. Integration, by definition, theoretically, is two-way. The minority who is here is expected to integrate to the majority So you can try to integrate. What if the majority doesn't want you? So the integration should go both ways. Just as the minority is borrowing from the majority culture, the majority should be prepared to also borrow from the minority culture. Otherwise, integration will never work. Toronto prides itself of being multicultural. So this question shouldn't be an issue at all. This question shouldn't be an issue. How can you be multicultural, yet you are debating about the fact that you are bringing some minority culture to play? So there are so many things that one can use to argue in favor of the Sankofa naming. If you are a black person, a youth, you are disillusioned about your Canadian citizenship. You go to work, you are looking for job, discrimination, housing discrimination. Meanwhile, you are born here, you don't have anything tied to your diasporic, your home country. Okay, this is your country. And now that you have a chance to be recognized, to enhance your sense of belonging, even there, people are against it. So these are some issues you have to keep in mind. Then, of course, the whole debate started with slavery. Now, if you go back, as the Sankofa want us to go back, you realize that much of the slavery was perpetrated at the point of shipment, the dungeon, where the slaves were shipped all the way through the Middle Passage was mostly in Ghana, Almila Castle, Cape Coast Castle. So that, if you go back and you don't want to repeat it, Sankofa will say, go back there and correct things. So there are so many things that we can see that will speak to the naming of this particular situation. Now, let me end with this point. There is what we call topophobia and topophilia. In geography, the topophilia is your love for a place. In a situation like this, when you name it after a concept, there is more likely to be a lot of topophilia because the concept is not going to commit crime. The concept is not going to change its identity. But if you name it for a person, then you have to be careful and mindful to the fact that that person is not going to do anything wrong. Because by the time it finishes, then, I mean, for instance, if you tie the person to this square and the person engaged in slavery, a black person like this, I get there and I have a sense of phobia. A fear of this place. I cannot be there because even the mention of the name get me discomfort. So these are some of the things that we have to keep in mind so that we don't have the majority abusing the right of the minority, because the poor people, the black people may not have the power to create the knowledge, but still we are all part of the Canadian mosaic. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that deputation. Seeing no questions to the deputant, it's at 12:30. We're going to take a break. We will be back at 1:30. I'm at the coalition conference doing a media event. In the odd chance I am 5-10 minutes late, do start. Okay, I will get back at 1:30. Hopefully.